The Incredibles 2 was released June 15th, 2018, directed by Brad Bird, and follows the first movie from the exact point we left off. However, before the movie even begins, there's two cold opens that are equally bizarre and out of place. First was roughly 2 minutes of the actors from the film saying how it's been 14 years. We know it took a long time, but we thank you for waiting with us patiently, and we think you'll really love the final product. And I'm just sat there thinking, wow, you guys are really nervous that this movie's gonna bomb, so you had to come out first and essentially beg for a decent review. However, I'm not gonna go easy on this film just because it was Pixar, or because it's quote-unquote meant for kids, or because it's a sequel, especially one 14 years later. I'll be judging this movie as a standalone film. Yes, I'll be using the original as reference for comparisons, but this review will be strictly how I feel about The Incredibles 2 as a film. Secondly, after that, there's a Pixar short called Bow, which was about an old woman whose husband is too busy with work, so she's left alone for the most part. And one day, while she's making dumplings, one cries out and suddenly sprouts arms, legs, and a face, gaining sentience, essentially. Throughout the short, you see this little doughboy slowly grow up and move on away from the old woman, when one day, the doughboy wants to move out and get married. So the old woman, in a frantic panic, eats the doughboy. When it cuts to the old woman crying in bed, it shows her real son come in, who hadn't been mentioned up to this point. The boy shares a striking resemblance to the doughboy, and he ends up sharing dumplings he brought with his mother as they cry together. The short goes on for another minute or so, showing them reconciling their differences and finally living happy, leaving the doughboy as a simple allegory for the old woman simply missing her son. And honestly, the short is done fairly well. It just seems strange to place it before this heart-pumping action superhero movie. It doesn't fit the tone whatsoever, and I can guarantee 90% of the audience will have forgotten it was on by the time that they leave the theater anyway. But I figured it was worth mentioning regardless. And finally, after all this is over and what felt like an eternity, the movie officially begins, starting off with a voice narrating where the events have left off. This voice is revealed to be Tony Reidinger, voiced by Michael Bird, who, if you don't recall, is the teenage boy that Violet, voiced once again by Sarah Vowell, has a crush on and tries to get him to notice her throughout the course of the first film. However, he unfortunately feels threatened by Violet and her family after seeing her in her supersuit without her mask on. As if that mask would actually protect you from being noticed at all, but regardless, the action shown in the first scene alone is enough to have you on the edge of your seat, and the animation, especially on Frozone, is exceptional, who by the way is in the movie much more than he was in the original, which I have to applaud as he's probably my favorite character in the franchise after all. But I'm sure you've come to expect all this from Pixar, but seriously, this movie has it down to a T. Each water movement or hair follicle is shown off perfectly. It seriously looks like animated characters in a real world at times. It's incredible. It's shown that Tony is telling this to Rick Dicker, voiced by Jonathan Banks, who's essentially the head of the FBI or some sort of intelligence agency, as he wipes Tony's memory completely clean of Violet. One thing I'd like to note right up front is how much the actors' voices have changed in 14 years. Violet sounds like she's gone through puberty again. Dash, voiced this time around by child actor Huck Milner, sounds completely different because, again, it's a different voice actor. But finally, both Elastigirl and Mr. Incredible, voiced again by Holly Hunter and Craig T. Nelson, respectively, both sound like they're on their last dying breath, like they've been doing nothing but smoking cigarettes for the last 14 years. And Elastigirl's voice specifically killed me inside. She sounds like she's doing an impression of her original character, and she adds such an emphasis on her lisp that it seriously is impossible not to notice, and it drove me fucking insane the entire runtime. After the attack that Tony had told of, which by the way is the mole people from the end of the first film, and after this fight they get away and are never mentioned again, which is honestly why I hesitated to mention them at all. They're completely pointless. After this battle is over, the Incredibles find themselves in an interrogation room getting grilled on the entire situation, because of course in this universe superheroes are illegal. They're luckily set free and approached by Evelyn and Winston Deaver, played by Catherine Keener and Bob Odenkirk, yes, Saul himself. And these two tell the Incredibles that they want to attach small cameras to their suits so that the public can see an entire situation play out, from the time the Incredibles get a call about crime to the time that the crime is put to a stop, instead of citizens just seeing what the media is showing about superheroes, which generally consists of them destroying parts of the city and being arrested in the end. and not the parts where they save everyone, which honestly plays into our real-life society with how messed up the mainstream media can be, especially the news. The Incredibles and Frozone all agree, but they seem to be solely focused on Elastigirl. So while she's out fighting crime and being super, Mr. Fantastic, or Bob, is stuck being a stay-at-home dad and finding it much harder than he could have anticipated, helping with homework, making food, helping with dating issues, keeping the baby safe, and in general just keeping the kids happy. You end up seeing Mr. Incredible gradually be beaten down throughout this film. He really reaches his wit's end, and it shows just how much stress he's under, which again plays into the real life with stay-at-home parents dealing with their whole life on their own. The societal messages behind this movie are fairly genuine and respectable. Elastigirl receives a new Elasticycle, which is a motorcycle that can split in half so she can use her elastic body to stretch even further over obstacles or gaps whenever she's driving. When she hops on, she crashes into a wall almost instantly, and it's made clear she'll need some practice. However, within 30 seconds, she's racing through a forest and jumping onto a highway into oncoming traffic, avoiding everything without a single hitch. At one point, she seriously stops, turns, and talks to passengers of another vehicle, and doesn't even look ahead at the road for a solid 15 seconds. I mean, she must have really caught on to driving that pretty quick, huh? Regardless, they receive a police report of some peculiar behavior going on, and when she goes to investigate, she finds a brand new monorail being built, but right as they cut the ribbon to officially open it, it starts speeding backwards, while filled with passengers. Elastigirl races through the city, even on the tops of roofs and through the back alleys to get to the train, which yes, she ends up driving on top of. And the entire sequence is absolutely insane. I'll have to give credit where credit is due. And by the end of it, however, you find out there's a new supervillain wreaking havoc named the Screenslaver, who uses hypnosis through electronic screens to control people. I was blown away to say the least by this whole sequence. Elastigirl, or Helen, calls Bob to tell him what happened and ends up letting it slip that she doesn't have much faith in him as a stay-at-home father, which in turn gives him a morality boost to start getting a grip on the parenting situation, which in time he gradually starts to. To celebrate their train victory, Winston and Evelyn contacted all superheroes in hiding to join them for a party. Helen sneaks off and finds out where the Screenslaver has been hiding, and she goes to find out whoever it is. While Bob, having not slept in days and being as worried and stressed as he can possibly be, takes Jack to the one person off the map he can trust, Edna, who actually takes a liking to Jack. I'd genuinely be interested to see more of their relationship grow if any sequels of this movie are ever to come, and based solely on the box office, I can almost guarantee we'll be seeing more Incredibles very, very soon. Anyway, Edna ends up making a super suit and a tracker for Jack, so you can tell which power he's going to use or where he's going to be invisible, and much, much more. While this is going on, it's revealed the Screenslaver was Evelyn all along, and right as Helen finds this out, Evelyn puts a pair of mind control goggles on her to assist with her bidding. Shortly after, goggles are placed on every side hero introduced, as well as Mr. Incredible when he attempts to save Elastigirl. Frozone goes to their house looking for Violet, Dash, and Jack to protect, but they're spotted by the side heroes who end up of course enslaving Frozone's mind as well, leaving the kids to their own devices. A ship is being sailed where all the country's leaders are signing a new law to reinstate superheroes back into society, and this is where Evelyn wants to make her big strike with her mind-enslaved techniques, to in fact keep superheroes illegal forever. As soon as the document is signed, she forces Mr. Incredible, Frozone, and Elastigirl to go in front of the camera and explain how they're going to seek revenge and eventually take over the world. The kids find them in the control room of the ship, and thanks to Jack, end up knocking the goggles off of them, bringing them back to reality. Mr. Incredible, Frozone, and the kids go towards different areas of the ship to save any passengers and prevent any further destruction, while Elastigirl grabs onto a getaway jet that Evelyn is trying to escape in. However, through some rather lucky odds, Elastigirl shoots Evelyn through the front of the plane with a flare gun. Unfortunately, she does end up saving her moments before she hits the ground. And yet, when Evelyn is placed in the back of the cop car, she says she still doesn't agree with Elastigirl's point of view explained throughout the movie, and that she essentially still holds a massive grudge regardless, even after being literally saved from a horrific death. But okay. While she's in the sky, Mr. Incredible is under the water near the propeller of the boat, dangerously trying to manually steer the ship in another direction, as its course is heading directly towards land, and through their combined efforts and powers, they're able to stop the ship right as it touches the first building it encounters. We cut away from the victory to see that after everything that's gone down, superheroes are officially reinstated back into society. Violet reintroduces herself and her family to Tony, and finally we wrap up the film watching the family drive away in their brand new Incredibile. So overall, I thought Incredibles 2 was a decent film, certainly not better than the original, which is honestly a masterpiece, so let's face it, this movie was never going to live up to the hype. Similarly to Duke Nukem Forever, some things end up taking too long to happen, and in many regards ends up being ruined as soon as you try to resurrect it. There's a reason properties die or simply end. However, this film is still worth seeing. It's much better than Cars 2, I'll tell you that much. The action and characters were a lot of fun, and there's hardly a dull moment in the entire film. The biggest complaint I have on the plot is the pacing issues regarding Jack's scenes, which almost entirely felt tacked on. If you took him out of the movie, you'd have almost nothing else different. This really just felt like Incredibles 2, actually just Elastigirl, because it was her movie in the end. She was the hero, she got the final blow, she saved the day. Sure, it was a family film, and the family saved the day, quote-unquote, but it was truly for Elastigirl, while everyone else just took a seat on the side. And let's face facts, this is probably for the best, because if there's one thing fans, critics, and general audiences alike can agree on, it's that Elastigirl is thick! And for all these reasons and more, I'm giving 2018's The Incredibles 2 a 7 out of 10. C.